Alrighty, well, good evening, everybody. Welcome into yet another episode of Three Up, Three Down. I'm excited to have a few different folks on here with us. Again, looking back at our 2021 season is our point of focus here in the middle of where we're at right now. And to do so, because 2021's been so different for all of us and has taken us, different times to kind of get back into the groove of things, we've really decided to go back to the World Series umpires, both from baseball here, and that's where we'll be at this week. I got a few individuals from the umpire crew on here this week. And then here coming up on October the 10th, we'll be excited to welcome in some of the softball World Series umpires as well and talk about their experience here in the softball side of things, as well as obviously as we're talking about here the baseball side of things too. But nonetheless, bigger pictures that reflect back on 2021, some of our major takeaways, and as we were all kind of challenged with different things in 2021, just see what we can go ahead and take away. So we're excited to have those individuals on, and I'll have an introduction to those guests here in just a second. A couple announcements from us as we get ready to get started. As I mentioned, kind of the big announcement here in this larger theme is that we've added the softball umpires to our reflections on 2021, excuse me. Don't want to go back to 2020. But on our reflections back here in 2021, those softball umpires will be back on October 10th. I've got several umpires from the 2021 COVID crew, if you will, from Williamsport back with us. A couple returners from last week, which we're excited to have back on. And then I think that's Colin is back on from last week. So too is Darren. A couple newcomers also with us here. Mike Devilak from the West out in California, and then Ricky Hall out in the East. He's with us as well. So those two are our newcomers, along as we mentioned here with Colin and Darren. We'll have each of those four kind of talk a little bit to us about their experience here as well. As we get in ready to talk to them, just kind of remember some of the ground rules. If you guys would please use the chat, drop any questions that you have in there. Remember, we're going to try and stay away from any specific situations or plays like that. And, our scope and our purpose is to reflect back upon 2021, what these umpires have kind of went through in their experience, both in World Series 1 and World Series 2, and how we can apply it then to us moving forward individually and collectively. So that's our scope here. And again, just use the chat. We'll screen it and we'll feed it to those individuals, but we welcome those questions here from you. Both Seth and DJ on with us to go ahead and help us out there. Other than that, that's really kind of all the announcements I've got here before I go ahead and dive in and give an introduction into what we're doing and introduce to our crew here. Seth, DJ, did I miss anything or anything that we need to go ahead and highlight here before we get started?
Go with me.
Alrighty, cool. Well, we'll roll on. Like I said, I want to welcome two new umpires from the COVID crew. Again, Mike Devilak from California and then Ricky Hall from the East. So both of those two were members of the 2021 COVID crew. And again, back joining us is Darren Beeschek from Connecticut. And then we've also got Colin Campbell back from the Southwest, here with us too. So we're excited to have them on. Last week, we talked in great detail about the crew chief model, and we'll touch base back with that here a little bit later in the episode here today. We've really focused on, why exactly Tom wanted to use that one, the benefits of it, and how exactly that looked like to kind of stimulate some ideas and some thoughts for people that may be looking to use the crew chief model either in district tournaments, state tournaments, or beyond. This week, we'll kind of move away from that and focus on pre- and post-game conferences as we did last week, kind of stepping away from those concepts. And then this week, we want to kind of try and dive right into the keys to our individual success that we had in 2021, keys to our collective success. So we'll definitely ask our umpires from the 2021 crew what they thought their keys to success were, both individually and collectively. We'll talk about some specific things that they may have struggled with and how exactly they kind of fought through and overcame that, some of the factors that allowed that to happen, and then kind of talk about this larger concept of, I think, one that is definitely harder to maintain as an umpire, or at least walk a line of, and that is the idea of resiliency and positive self-talk. So that's kind of our scope here today. Again, just examining the keys to individual and collective success, looking at our struggles and how exactly we can overcome them, and then really focus on ways in which we can apply those concepts of resiliency and positive self-talk. So I'm excited to go ahead and get things started. I'm going to go ahead and start to prompt a couple questions to our COVID crew here. And you guys, as these questions come up, feel free to go ahead and just jump right on in. Don't worry about speaking over one another. Usually you guys end up just kind of yielding the floor here. So whoever wants to jump right on in, go right ahead and do so. I want to kind of tie back last week to this week here, though, to start. And as I mentioned, we started last week in a place of that crew chief model. And, in the conversation of individual and collective success, I know that Darren, you and Colin both had an opportunity to talk about this last week. So maybe Ricky and Mike, if you guys would talk a little bit about this one, what impact do you guys think the crew chief model had on your individual success and then also your crew's success? We'll start there.
Go first, if that's okay, Ricky.
Please.
Okay, good. Look, I listened in last week. Got the replay of it. It was a good, very good session. I have to echo what the guys said last week. I think going into this World Series, we were all contacted sometime in May and asked to come back and kind of a short window and wondering what was going to go on. How they were going to facilitate this. And when we started talking about the 4 umpire system, that changes things as well. Right now we're talking about rotations and how are we going to rotate. And then Tom, of course, introduced the crew chief concept, and the crew chiefs right away got together with their crews. We talked through a lot of things. We talked about the rotations, talked about how we're gonna do things. And I think Jason said it last week. Look, everybody that went to this World Series, I got to tell you, the highest, most respect. These are some of these guys I worked with. Were Cullen I was with in 2018. I know Chris Rutz because I work with him out here on the West Coast. But all the names that were on that list, Dave Cofield and on our crew, and of course Brian Henry. And Ricky, I've heard of all these guys before, and I knew they were top-notch umpires. So it was going to be interesting to for me, anyways. We all got together. How is that all going to shake out? And I think it was said last week, and I can tell you from the minute we got together, even as a crew, the Eagles were checked in at the door. There was no big league in anybody. There was none of that. It was all we're one big group, and we really can all work together with it. So I think the crew chief concept was a great one, particularly as we went to the 4 umpire system. The crew chiefs did a wonderful job getting the groups together, talking through things, bouncing things back up. But Tom, you got to remember, Tom, and he mentioned last week, Tom was missing his crew, right, his supervisor. So we really had to all jump in. Those crew chiefs really did a wonderful job getting it set up and filling in where they need to fill in, particularly in Volunteer Stadium. But I think everybody on the entire crew, all 12 umpires, really worked well together. At least that was my take. Ricky?
Yeah, Mike, I think you said it really well there. And I think the crew chiefs themselves worked tirelessly, I think, to bring us together as a crew and utilize us in the best possible manner. But as Mike said, nobody who was a crew chief flaunted their crew, their chiefdom. It wasn't like they walked around, wearing some special number on their sleeve. Instead, they just led by example and really helped each of us become better umpires. And they were also open to suggestions and ideas from the crew. I thought the crew chiefs were really well chosen and did a great job, because that is a job that is a lot of extra responsibility at times. And if you have the wrong personality in there, it can go kind of bad. I thought the three chiefs did a great job, and I think it just brought us closer together as a crew.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw Dave Cofield jump on here with us. Dave was another member of the crew too, from the Southwest. So Dave, good to have you on. Dave, we were just trying to tie together last week to this week, and both Mike and Ricky were sharing, how they thought the crew chief model was essentially instrumental to, your all collective success and your individual success. So I'm just asking for just a brief reflection on how you may have felt that the crew chief model was an integral part to your own individual success and your crew success.
I think, I would echo what everyone said last week and what everyone has said today. I think what it did was it provided some structure for us. It provided a point of contact. We weren't all sitting in a locker room looking, at each other, wondering who was in charge or who's going to take the lead on something. That was pretty much laid out for us. So I think I appreciated the fact that I didn't have to wonder, who was going to be the one to talk to, if we needed to talk to Tom about something, whether it was regarding mechanics or where we had to be, game, protocol, whatever. There was somebody in charge of that. And so, I appreciated the fact that, that they did that. And I would echo what the other guys said. There were no egos in the locker room. There were I got to tell you, I really enjoyed the 11 other guys that we were with. And, everybody just went to have a good time. And there was no, mine's bigger than yours kind of thing going on there. It was, we enjoyed each other. And part of that, I think, was, the fact that we couldn't have any families there, and so we only had each other basically. So we hung out a lot more than I did with the crew a couple of years ago when I was there. So I think that also brought us closer together. And I know that might be a little bit off topic, but it was on my mind, and I wanted to say that.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you guys sharing that. And again, you guys have just by the crew chief model, and Tom and I, we've definitely had conversations about crew chiefs and things like that, and using them definitely spurred some thought here for us in the Central region moving forward about how to use them potentially during the tournaments. And I think probably not only is the structure really good for people to succeed, and that's one of the benefits of it. But as you guys mentioned too, I think one of the keys to it, and this is probably what makes every crew like even more special, is just the ability to kind of check your ego at the door, and how valuable that is. As big of a cliche as that is, whether you're working a district tournament or whatever it is, nobody wants to be around that guy or that umpire, if you will. So I think that's a huge compliment to the types of people that you guys had on that crew. And I know our softball crew, when we have them on the 10th, will probably reflect upon the same thing. But just really good feedback, I think, there for anyone considering ways in which to kind of elevate some folks within their districts, within their states, or potentially within their regions, to hold on to folks in positions of leadership. And, the more we can empower and afford opportunities to folks, I think the better. And that's exactly, I think, what we get out of the crew chief model. So,
Stu, can I just add one more thing to that?
absolutely. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so the other thing I thought was interesting is we stayed in the same crews for a couple rotations, right? Everyone 2 plates, 2 third base, 2 second, 2 first. But we did have some situations where towards the end we were intermixed, or we had an umpire go down and somebody had to jump in. And I think the thing that all the crew chiefs did is they were all singing from the same song sheet. So when we had to plug and play somebody else somewhere else, or we had to move somebody out of rotation, I thought that went very smoothly, because we were all kind of on the same page. We're all running the same mechanic. We're all running the same, pretty much the same pre-games as I listened into them, and even the post game. So I thought that was pretty good on the crew chiefs' part to make sure that we were all kind of dialed in.
Yeah. The other thing, Mike, that's an excellent point. The other thing that I noticed is we stayed together, as Mike mentioned, for a lot of the time. I also never really found any crew competition, right? It wasn't like our crew versus another crew, which can sometimes happen when you're strictly, create a crew that you work with for the whole tournament, or at least the vast majority of it. And so it's us against them, or our crew's better than this one, and that kind of thing. So I think the crew chiefs did a great job of setting the tone such that we were still a crew of 12, and we happened to work in crews of 4 that were led by a chief, but we were all still part of the same team. And I think that's a delicate balance you got to be careful about.
It's a great one. I'm writing down that note right now, Ricky. Crews of 12. You're a crew of 12 within 4. That's a huge concept to know. That's a great point. You guys are definitely segueing nicely to kind of this next phase, and that is this whole idea of some of the keys to your success. And Mike, you mentioned checking the ego at the door. So too did you, Dave, and Darren. You and Colin, get free to jump in here whenever as well. I want to kind of move a little bit into really extrapolating some of the things that you guys thought were instrumental to either your individual and or collective success. And I think one thing here, Mike, that you mentioned was staying together as a crew, and then the no crew competition, which was huge from Ricky too. I want to circle back to that whole idea of staying together as a crew and kind of flush that out a little bit. Maybe that is one of the things for us to consider as assigners potentially of district and state tournaments and things like that. How might staying together as a crew be one of the keys to potential success then of individuals and the collective crew?
Well, I'll go again if that's okay, guys. Just my personal thoughts. I thought it was interesting because when we got our first assignments, we saw where everyone was going to be in the rotations, not really knowing how to read off each other, not really knowing how each other are going to move, because we haven't had that opportunity to really work with each other. But as those crews work together, even into the second and third games, you got to get a feel for how people were going to move, how we're going to read, where we're going to go. And I got to tell you, after the first rotation, I felt very comfortable for the most part in where everyone was going to be. I knew, Ricky was right across from me, whether it was at first to third or third to first or second to home or home to second. We were working across, and I know I had Dave on one of the wings and Brian on one of the wings for me. There's a comfort factor to it. And we got in a groove. I think we understood how people were going to go. go and where they were going to go. And one of the things, and I don't want to jump too far ahead. One of the things for me that I was, I don't the words nervous, just anticipating was going to be the rotations with four, because at this level, the I don't know if it looks that way on TV. It moves fast. The kids, I think Cullen said it last week. The pitches come in. It's not your Saturday afternoon down at your local league where you're getting 55 miles an hour. These balls are getting up there in a hurry, and it's the same with the hits. It's the same with the throws across the infield. The running. The kids are fast. And, you don't have a lot of time on a small field sometimes to read. I mean, you got to go. I can tell you one quick story. And this is our third game, I think it was, if you don't mind, Stu, if I can jump into that. Yeah. So, okay, cool. So I was at third. It was a night game, and Brian was at second, and we had a runner at second base and a ball, kind of a looping fly ball. And I think Ricky will remember this, and Dave was on the plate. But we had a ball go out to left field, and in the rotate or the mechanics we had at me as a third base umpire, I really have to go and balance between second and third if Brian goes out, and if I go out, then Brian balances. Well, that ball went out there and it wasn't really high. It was a fly ball, and I kind of drop stepped. I looked at him, he looked at me, and we kind of started going the same way together. We got frozen. We were both going, then we jumped back the other way. Before you knew it, he went out on the fly ball, was left field, and I took off to third. But there's no way in the world I'm getting inside to balance third and second. So I had to take a look over my shoulder. I saw the base runner going back to second to tag, and I said, holy smokes, this is going to be fun. And as the ball was coming down, I took a quick look over my shoulder as I'm moving towards third base. And I was going to have to take this like third base on the foul side, kind of from a wedge, or call on the rail, whatever you want to call it. I was taking it from the foul side. I knew I would have to, or I get hit with the ball coming across. So I glanced, and I just tried to time the catch and look to see if the guy left from second, and it looked good to me. And I got to third just in time for the throw, just about a step before the throw got there, and the throw was offline, no big deal. But guess what happens? They go back and they want to appeal. I'm thinking, holy smokes, what's going to happen now? And I had to go with what I had. And all I had was my glance over the shoulder. And then I think they went to Dave, but that's not reviewable. So I think I got it right. I was never really able to verify that, but they couldn't appeal it. So we went with it and went with what we had. But afterwards we talked about it and how we could, better that in the future. And again, I think it's, the read part of it is huge. You have to be able to read and make a decision right away. Brian and I kind of froze each other. But the other part of it, we were talking, and Ricky was starting to move in because he could see what was happening. He was at first base, and he could actually see here's my dilemma. If that runner starts to go, and I'm a third baseline extended or second to third extended, and they go back to second with that, and that's my call because I'm supposed to balance that, I'm going to be making that call from 70 feet away on a straight line. So Ricky, to his credit, he was watching it and he was getting ready to go in case he had to. So these are things we didn't necessarily pregame, and we started to pregame more about it and learn about that. But I got to tell you, there's a minor league umpire friend of mine, Nate Diedrich, who uses the term crew saver. And when you're working 4-6, he calls it a crew saver. And whether you're in the play or not in the play, whether it's Dave or whether it's Ricky and Brian and I are working that play, somebody else can see it. It could be a ground ball. It could be a ground ball in the infield. And if you're the third base umpire, you got move in a position where you can see a throw to first base. Maybe you can help the crew. And I guess we kind of learned from that too. And I guess everyone was working, and you can't take any time off. You had to just keep working on it. So sorry I rambled on that. But that was one play I thought about that kind of blew up on us, but it worked out okay. But others were able to jump in, and Ricky was ready to go. Dave had the plate, and I think if it would have broke down, I think Ricky would have been there at second base to help me on the back end of that.
Yeah, it's a good story. Yeah, it's a good story, and a great example, like you said, of I think the chemistry that you end up building in the same crews. So that's a benefit of it, and then just that comfort factor relying on to be a crew saver and being able to step up in that role when called upon. So let's continue to flush that out. Some keys to either individual or collective success. Anyone else want to take some of the things here, either before the tournament, during the tournament, some of the things that you found to really help you be successful on the diamond?
Stu, I thought that and this is somewhat connected, I think, to the conversation last week. I thought that the pregame and postgame conferences were absolutely essential. And I have, we of course, we do pregame in most of the games that you do. But when you're working with the quality of umpires that were here, I was really taken aback by the level of specificity and detail that the pregame conferences went through. And Mike's alluding to some of that too, as we learned in post games and made adjustments as we needed to on a bunch of things that are not necessarily covered in the mechanics manual. Sitting in a pregame with the quality of umpires that I had a chance to work with on my crew, for example, I imagine to be very much like listening to a series of surgeons talk about a really complicated surgery that's coming up, or just individuals who are extremely good at what they do and know it really well and take the time to game plan out the kinds of scenarios you need to be ready for when you are at a show like the Little League World Series and you're under the lights. And I got so much, not just from the opportunity to speak to them in pregame and postgame with them, but also just a bunch in my own development as an umpire. It was really a wonderful experience.
It's interesting you say that, Ricky. We had this is how detailed it got. And you talk about detail. Whether you're on volunteer, whether you're on Lamade, had even an impact on. We got into the detail about when foul balls went down the line. What do you do with them? And on volunteer, they don't have the camera wells. And what we saw one of the crews doing early on was trying to run them back in and get them in down below into where the supervisor sits. So we decided when we were in volunteer, and I think others caught on to that after, is that we would have any balls that were hit down the line get into the first or second baseman or third or short and get them into the catcher. So we didn't have umpires running over to the dugouts basically and dropping balls off. And then if we were on Lamade, then we would just throw them into the camera well, which maybe. But again, that's the detail we were getting into to make it look as clean as possible, and make it look as professional, not amateurish, and keep the game moving along.
Yeah, and I'll just add my 2 cents. One thing I took away from this, working with these guys, these 11 guys, was how serious they took their job, and how and how well they prepared. Whether it was cleaning your shoes outside the locker room, whether it was a pregame, whether it was getting to the field long, before your game started. This was a group of guys that, has already been there before. And I'm not going to say anybody would have phoned it in or could have phoned it in. I don't mean to go down that road, but it would be easy to be lulled into that. Hey, I've been here before, probably never coming back. So, whatever happens. And, I didn't see that. And that made me better, as I had that all around me that week. These guys were there, and this was a big deal to them, and a big deal to me as well. And to see how everyone prepared to take the field. And I got to tell you, every single one of us wanted to be perfect. And, some of us weren't, some of us, or maybe all of us weren't, but I'll tell you what, we strived for perfection. And when we took the field, that's what we wanted. And I think being around that for 10 days made me better.
I think 2021 was definitely a challenging year for a lot of folks because, depending on where you were at in the country, your season could have been normal and really new and different. It may have started super further late. You may have had like ebbs and flows to different types of restrictions in the season too. So I want to continue to talk about this idea of keys to success and just talking about like your road to Williamsport and what exactly your 2021 looked like, because obviously in 2020 games were few and far between for a lot of folks. So, to get the call in May, to have to show up a few months later to do a tournament that had never been played in that type of capacity before, with an opportunity that no one else has really had before, like that's a lot on the plate of a lot of people. So I kind of want to flush that out and just talk about your road from, the first phone call in May all the way to, when you guys arrived in mid to late August. What exactly did you guys do, or what did you find in yourself needing to do to prepare? And what are some things that you struggled with as we kind of tried to get reacclimated to baseball from 20 to 2021?
So I'll go. When I got the call in May, we were heading into our district tournament here in South Texas in San Antonio. And so I ended up working, I think, every single night for like 2 weeks straight for our major boys district tournament. it's a double elimination tournament, so it takes several days to complete. And then we hosted major boys sectionals as well. So I worked virtually every night for sectionals. And then I went up to Texas. Our Texas West tournament is up in Abilene. And so I was able to go up there and work some games up there as well. So, obviously, which is ironic because, that team from Abilene was a representative from Texas at Williamsport, and I had the plate for their game too, which was that was like, wow. But anyway, so that was what I did was, just it was probably, I don't know, starting mid-June to mid-July. It was virtually every night for me during that time.
Yeah, with Dave, if I didn't know better, I thought someone was playing a joke on me when Tom called and asked me two questions. He'd been vaccinated. I said, yeah. And he said, do you want to come back? And I thought, who's playing this joke? And it was real. And at that point, then I hadn't worked the year before. I hadn't worked any games, maybe 3 before the COVID shutdown, and had really worked a handful leading up to tournament time. And so I had to really ramp up too. And I tried to do as many games as I could. I tried to get extra looks where I could. I have a local high school here that they were throwing bullpen sessions. So I wanted to see some pitches from, their kids that threw harder just to see the pitches. And they accommodated that. But the interesting thing for me, and very similar to Dave's, is one of the teams that represented Southern California, the B team, was a team from Torrance. I live in Torrance. The field is literally about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from my house, and so I had seen them all throughout the year. I'd done their leagues. I saw them district, section, state, region, and then at the World Series. And so yeah, kind of like Dave's story. I had seen one of the teams there, and that was kind of interesting to be there when they were there. We had there was a managers meeting, and the coach from Torrance was there just before tournaments, and he said, "Hey, I heard you're going back to Williamsport." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'll see you there." And I said, "You will?" He goes, "Yeah, I got a good team this year. We're going to be there." And I'm thinking, yeah, 7,000 teams. Sure, I get that every year. We'll see you there. And sure enough, they were there. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my road kind of very similar to Dave and Mike's. After picking myself up off the floor, after Tom called and said, would you be interested in coming back? Spent a lot of time doing district, sectional, state, and then spent a fair amount of time at the East Region tournament as well, and just trying to get myself game ready for the World Series. And I mean, the other thing that's interesting is that we took that call in May, and so much detail wasn't really known at that time in terms of what was going to be allowed. They gave some ideas of where they were, but of course with an ever evolving circumstance. Some of the rules and regulations, for example, did in fact change from the time we took the assignment to when we actually showed up at the door. So there was also the added bonus of things just changing as a result of the virus and how that was going.
Going along and kind of continuing to go through here, some of the keys to success and whatnot. I think working games is probably one of the biggest things that all of us would have done to make sure we got ourselves some experience and things like that. But at the same time, it's not necessarily quantity, although that is definitely a factor in the equation. It's also the quality of the reps that you're getting, whether it be better baseball, better pitching, as Mike, you mentioned, to see in the bullpens, or, the mental process, I think, too. And Dave, you alluded to this, just the seriousness by which all 12 of the umpires at the World Series took the job in front of them. And that's not a light switch that you just turn on. So as we talk about that with the job in front of them in Williamsport, I think it's also probably important to note here, DJ and I often talk about this Lamedy mentality that, obviously you guys kind of knew where you were headed. So to turn on that Lamedy switch, if you will, right after you got the call was probably one of the biggest things that you had to do in order to get yourself right, mentally and physically, even for the opportunity ahead of you in August. thinking back to that process and then even that time in August. So this can be at any point throughout your season, and then anything that you may have had during the World Series as well. Take us into that preparation and just some things that you found that you kind of maybe struggled with, that you were trying to fix up a little bit before getting into Williamsport, or even when you got into Williamsport, and maybe something that you struggled with or was challenging to you that you had to work through. And take us not only through like one of the specific things that you had to work on, but also then what exactly you did to get better at those through either out the preparation time or in Williamsport as well.
One of the things I was again antsy about was the 4 umpire rotation. There's all kinds of variations to the way people do four umpire, and a district level, and depending on the level of expertise your crewmates have, depends on how the plate man wants to run it. And to me, what we were running was a little bit different than I've run before. And the one thing I didn't want to do was let the crew down and miss a rotation, because I think the other thing we all knew going into this was new. This hadn't been done before. The crew chief and the 4 umpire mechanics that we were going to run, and this could be a prelude for something down the road. Maybe it's we're transcending into something new, and we'll see 4 umpires all the time now. And hopefully, we did a job that was well enough, or thought well enough, that it could be done. I think the other part of it was bringing umpires back. I mean, there's been some discussion in the past. Do you bring umpires back, and how do you do that? And if you do, how do you mix it? And we were all coming back for a second time, so that was out of it. I mean, we don't have to worry about necessarily mixing in with any new umpires or bringing them into it. But I think the fact that we had been there before, the awe of being in Williamsport for the first time under the lights, we'd all been there. So I think that piece was kind of a given. That doesn't mean you don't get nervous, you don't get butterflies. We all had them, we all knew, and we wanted to. We really wanted to succeed. We wanted this to be a success, because this was a new opportunity for everybody. So having said that, I didn't want to mess everything up. And again, I mentioned the bullpen sessions. The other thing I did, and I probably looked like a knucklehead out in the field, I was going up to fields and standing at third base and imagining a ball was hit over the center fielder's head. Where was I going? Nobody on base. Now I got to run around second. And I was just running in and just trying to get where I had to be, from second base, from first base, from the plate, just making sure I visually was running this through. And I got to tell you, you talk about kind of talking yourself through a game. I felt like I was, again, back in high school playing ball, because every time a situation came up, we had our pre-pitch signals, but I was in my head saying, okay, if it's hit to left field, down line, I know if I'm on third base, I know I'm going out, but if it's hit somewhere else and Brian goes out, what am I doing? Or if it's hit on the ground, what am I doing? Just running all these situations through my head, because I just wanted to take nothing for granted. I don't want to leave anybody high and dry, and want to leave the crew high and dry. I wanted to do, the best I could do. So I spent probably, quite honestly, about 3 or 4 weeks, a couple times a week, going to the local field, and just trying to run those situations in my head and run the drill. So that was kind of my prep for it, and how I wanted to see it through.
Keep opening the door for the other ones to join in. Just some of the things maybe that you had to struggle with or work through as you were preparing to show up in Williamsport. And again, that can be in the months leading up to Williamsport, or as I mentioned, in Williamsport. Just some of the things that either challenged you the most or something that you struggled with, and how exactly you went ahead and kind of found a plan through it.
So Stu, I in 2017 went to the World Series as a scissor umpire, using the scissors behind the plate. And then when I began working at the East Region and really trying to standardize the work that we're doing relative to plate mechanics, adopted the Jerry Davis box. And so here, the scissor worked very, very well for me for a long, long time, for almost 25 years. And then it was time to change. And so I'm still 4 years into just making that change and going to the World Series in kind of a new way of doing my plate mechanics. And so I worked on that quite a bit during the summer, but I got to tell you, even worked on it quite a bit while I was there, and really was able to pick the brain of the crew that is in the scores of years of experience that they had. And again, another way that I felt that I got better as an umpire is I learned a lot more about that stance from those amazing umpires. So that was something that I worked on and continue to work on, even throughout throughout the tournament. And in some ways, in a weird way, sometimes the games at Williamsport are easier to umpire. The last plate game that I did was the South Dakota no-hitter, where California and South Dakota pitched a remarkable ball game. All of those pitchers who pitched in that game pitched really well. The next plate game that I did was a 16-6 fall ball game back here at home. And I got to tell you, that was a harder game to umpire actually than the one where my right arm just kept going up and had to call strikes. And so in some ways it was a pretty easy game to umpire, but working on that new stance is something that I continue to work on.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I know what Ricky's referring to, because I had to make a mechanics change as well. The past, I think, 4 years, I changed to the mechanic of pointing my strikes instead of using the hammer. And I think Ricky did the same thing.
Yeah.
And when I got the call, I noticed I'd emailed Tom and I said, should I go back to the hammer? And of course he said, if you can, we'd prefer that. So I knew what they preferred. So every game I did, I went back to the hammer and I practiced it. And it took me a few weeks to get comfortable with it again. So that was a little bit of a struggle getting back to that, but not as hard as I thought it was going to be. After a few games, it kind of came back to me. And now I'm toying with the idea of, do I stay with it? Do I go back? What do I do? I'm not really sure. So I think I'm just going to stay with it instead of having to change it again. But
Yeah.
that was one of the biggest things for me, I think. But once I got back to it, it was like riding a bike again. So it came back pretty easy.
Something for me was, I was originally supposed to do 50-70 Southwest regionals this year. And so I worked a lot on the big field, and tried to work as many, 4 umpire crews on the big field that I could get, with, various other, umpires that, previous World Series umpires, from our district. And so when I got that call, it was like, okay, well, I need to jump back on the small field, because I had been, focusing hard on the big field mechanics. So that was definitely a change for me. And not a setback, but just a challenge. But luckily I had the support, from our, a lot of our district guys here that have had success, through various World Series, and that helped me a lot.
That's good stuff. I think, small little tweaks are definitely things that we all can probably attest to. Like everybody on this call can definitely, say, hey, this is what I worked on this season. And I think the mental awareness is a huge part of it. And just having a plan of getting reps in and things like that and being aware of it, as you guys have mentioned, are definitely huge factors to success and ultimately allow us to, handle some adversity in the midst of some high pressure situations or preparing for that as well. So appreciate you guys sharing keys to success, and then, just some of the struggles that you guys had leading up to it. A couple last kind of things here to round out. We got a couple more conversations to have, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up for us. I do want to give you guys an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about any type of advice, words for encouragement for all of us that are aspiring to get to the World Series one day, or just advance up the ranks here, so to speak. So that's kind of the first part, and then Mike, I'm going to come back to you. I'll have you finish with talking about the number 91 here and what that meant to you. So before we get to Mike and that, just kind of anything that you guys want to offer to your fellow umpires, both on the call and then obviously those that'll watch in on the replay, just thinking about where they're at in this process and any goals that they may be looking to aspire to accomplish in little bit.
Well, I'll go again, I guess. So it was interesting. We talked about the dynamics of the group and all the umpires that came back this year. Like I said, I had the opportunity to work with a couple of them. I knew them I knew the group by name, but I hadn't had a chance to work with any of them. And again, you come into a situation like this. I was given the advice when I came in 2018 to be as vanilla as possible. Just do what you're supposed to do. Don't overdo. Work hard, hustle, do what you need to do, and just be yourself. And again, I think leaving ego out of it and not trying to ever big league anybody or say I've done this or done that. I think is a good idea when you get in with any group of people. Let your what you do on the field, let that speak for how good you are. You don't need to talk about it. And I don't know. I just find being humble and being working hard and just going at the best you can, preparing like we talked about. Everybody was getting ready for it. We had a short window to get ready and make some changes. Like Colin said, he went from 90 to 60, and some of us, weren't even going to work the tournament or work any tournaments this year. So it was a fast forward, but I think everybody worked really hard on it. And again, with checking those egos at the door and just really just working hard at what you know and ask questions. I mean, we did those post games. Nobody took anything personally. And again, you get a group of umpires that have been doing it as long as we all have. People can get defensive about things, but I didn't hear anybody get defensive. We all took it very openly, took it as a potential new opportunity. And it's kind of like you go back and you watch it on TV and you look at yourself and go, holy smokes, what, why did I call that a strike or whatever it is, right? You start doing a little self-evaluation. And I think listening to someone else critique you and ask for a good critique when you're trying to work your way up, ask for an honest critique. And that's hard sometimes because if you're a good umpire and there's people that are maybe trying to live up to what you are or whatever, or trying to be what you are, they don't want to give you an honest opinion. But if the real umpires will, and we had that in Williamsport, everyone was willing to give honest opinions on what we could have done a little differently, a little better. And I really appreciated that. I really did, because it made me a better umpire.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And I think, surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you hone your craft and develop your expertise and sometimes that can be difficult to find people who are like-minded, who are going to help you along the way. That's the other thing that I found so gratifying about this time in the World Series. I loved my time in 2017, but this time in 2021, to be around this group of people, we just geeked out all week about umpiring and the expertise of umpiring, and that no detail was really ever left unspoken. And to have that level of professionalism. Right now, we're not professionals in the sense that we're paid, but the second definition of professionalism in Webster's dictionary is people who have an expertise, and these folks had an expertise, and you get better around those kinds of people. So surround yourself with those kinds of people to get better.
Not sure if Dave is still on here.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm in and out. I'm sitting in my car in a parking lot, so
No
I'm not on Wi-Fi, so I'm in and out. So I'm sorry about that. I would say I enjoyed just like everybody's comes from different, everybody has different backgrounds. Everybody did something different locally, like with their local league, regionally, their level of involvement. I think it's fascinating to talk to guys and see like how many other umpires, work in their leagues, how many umpires they can get to work their tournaments. That's something we struggle with big time down here. And it just, I just like hearing everyone else's experiences across the country and what goes on in various parts of the country. So I appreciated that. I appreciated getting to know everyone and hearing, what they did back home with regards to Little League.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's definitely all things that definitely bring us together. One thing many of us have been able to do that have been fortunate to work regional or World Series tournaments is choose a number that we get to wear on our sleeves. And obviously, some of us choose the number that, maybe you and your wife's anniversary, the year that your child was born, or, the number that you may have worn when you were playing. But Mike, you've got a very interesting story about why you chose the number 91. And no offense, Mike, we know you weren't born in 1991. But if you could
Far from it.
Yeah, if you could, I was a young buck then. I think I was about 3 or 4 years old. But if you could, talk through us about why 91, because I think it's a really interesting story and one definitely to kind of send us on our way home for. So, Mike, go ahead and share why you chose 91.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the deal was this: when I was asked to or invited to come in 2018, the number I normally had worn for years is an old hockey and football number 11, and I actually that kind of from number 1, but I thought 1 just looked weird. So 11 was one I really liked. So when I originally, when they originally said numbers, but you can't pick 11 because that's been retired by Little League. I guess they had a young gentleman who had passed away. So 11 was out. And then the group I was with, we were kind of sharing what numbers do you guys want? And then I was thinking, okay, how about number 1? Well, one of the guys said, I'm from District 1 in Kentucky. I really want that number. Okay, fair enough. Maybe I'll go 27. Had a guy say 27 is on my wife's anniversary or something. So 20, because I'm from District 27, California. I said, okay. So I started thinking. And so the deal was this. So that was in 2018. In 2017, which is almost 4 years ago, October 1st, 2017. I had my family, my wife, and the majority of my kids and their friends were at in Las Vegas. We were at the Route 91 Harvest Festival, and that was the festival on the final night where a gunman had opened fire on the crowd below. He was shooting from the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay. And that night there were 58 people that were killed that night, and there were over 800 people that were hurt that night. And it's interesting because I was telling you, Stu, I went to a concert last night here in California. Jason Aldean, country guy. He was the act. He was the guy on stage when that whole thing started. And so I don't know. I guess to pay tribute to just to what happened that night, and just not forget that. I'll never forget it. I won't, because bullets were flying all over. None of my family was hurt. We thankfully got out. I run into people around. Actually, it was funny. A couple All-Stars ago, tournaments ago, I had a little sticker on the back of my car, and it said, Route 91 Survivor. And I've had people come up to me and say, hey, were you there? And we were there too, kind of thing. And we had a friend that was lost, or we had a friend that got shot, or whatever it was. And so I don't know. I just wanted to kind of pay tribute to that whole group. Even last night, Jason Aldean said, I know we got a lot of Route 91 people out here. So I think everyone that was there had been affected by it. And it was just my way to pay tribute, I guess, lack of a better word. It'll be my number from here on out.
Yeah, that is awesome. And one of the awesome things just about Little League in general is all of our stories. And Mike, that's a fantastic story, and one that I have heard a few times before, and definitely never get tired of hearing whatsoever. And then the same is true just listening to you guys talk about your experience. And listen to any umpire really talk about their experience in Little League and the relationships that they've had is always just something that I find very interesting. And Dave, you mentioned this as well. Just listening to people's stories and the experiences that they've had. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the platform, I guess, by which 3 Up, 3 Down has allowed us to have kind of internationally here now, and even nationally as well. So I just appreciate all of you guys, and just want to say thank you here yet again to the members of the 2021 Little League Baseball World Series COVID crew. Mike Debelak on with us from the West, Rick Hall from the East, Dave Cofield from the Southwest, and both Darren, you and Colin joined us repeat again. And I appreciate you guys taking the time and being open and willing to share here, your experiences and what all we can kind of take away. And that'll make us better umpires as we go on for our fall ball games, our state games, and then hopefully one day when we all get the call to a World Series. And I'm sure there are a bunch of nuggets that we took away from this week. I know I got a page full of notes again, and just like last week too. So just thank you again for taking time to being open to share and taking the time to join us here. So we appreciate you guys being on.
Thanks for having me, Stu.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Last thing I got, and we'll get ready to shut it down and just kind of post game it. We'll hang out and talk with anybody that wants to talk for a few minutes here afterwards. But just last minute reminders, next week will be the last week that we'll have the members of the Baseball World Series on with us. The 2021 Little League Baseball umpires will be back with us again next week. Another round of them here to go through and flush out some of their experiences. And then the week after that, October the 10th, really excited to have the softball umpires on tap here with us as well. So we'll have those individuals here with us to share their experience, promote the softball side of things. And again, the next 2 weeks will be great for us to not only reflect upon 2021, but also then kind of think about what we can take away from not only what we've experienced in 2021, but what others have also experienced, and apply it then to getting better here as we all turn the page to 2022. Again, thank you to those individuals that were here tonight, not only to listen to the conversation, participate. Thanks to everybody that's listening on replay. And again, a huge thanks to the COVID crew. We'll see you guys next week on October the 3rd, same time, same place, 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll hang around and kick it around here in the post game. Other than that, everyone, have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.
Thanks, Stu.
Yep. All right.